Once upon a time, in a small village, there lived a couple named Neka and Obina. They had been married for 10 years but had no children. This weighed heavily on them, and they became very worried. They decided to seek help during this difficult time. Obina was always there for his beautiful wife Neka, and would not allow anyone to call her barren. They went from one dibia, healer, to another, seeking solutions for their inability to have a child. Whenever they explained their problem, the dibia assured them to be patient, saying that in Chukwu's God's timing, they would have a child. Weeks turned into months, and months into years, but still Neka did not conceive a child. Neka was at the village market buying foodstuffs when she noticed an old woman begging from the traders. The old woman, whose name was Adanma, had no money and was asking the traders for just a little bit of food as she was very hungry. However, the traders chased her away, not wanting anything that could bring them bad sales that day. Neka was moved with pity for Adanma and decided to help her. She approached Adanma and asked what she wanted. The woman said she only wanted some plantains to eat with her children that day. Neka then bought the and offered to carry them home for Adanma. As they walked, the old woman studied Neka's palm and revealed that she would soon be smiling, as she would no longer be called barren. Neka would soon carry her own child. Neka hurried home to share the good news with her husband Obina. Sure enough, Neka became pregnant and gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Chibuzor. However, 3 months after giving birth, Neka fell deathly ill. Fearing she may not survive, she made Obina promise to marry her best friend Adeze, so that Adeze could care for baby Chibuzor as her child if Neka passed away. Adeze promised Neka that she would love Chibuzor like her own son. Tragically, Neka did not survive the illness. Obina honored Neka's dying wish and married Adeze. At first, Adeze loved and cared for Chibuzor, but eventually, she became jealous of how close the bond was between Obina and his son. Adeze grew desperate to bear Obina a son of her own. Adeze eventually became pregnant, but she gave birth to a girl, which disappointed her as she desperately wanted a son. Though not happy about it, she cared for the girl. When Adeze got pregnant again, hoping for a son this time, she once more gave birth to another girl. Meanwhile, Chibuzor was a very smart and talented boy, loved by everyone in the village. Despite being motherless, he grew up to be a kind-hearted young boy. He loved his half-sisters dearly and treated them well. Chibuzor became an excellent hunter at a young age, gaining skills that made his father Obina very proud. Obina cherished his son Chibuzor and sometimes favored him over Adeze's daughters, though he loved all his children. This fueled Adeze's jealousy and resentment towards Chibuzor. Finally, after 2 daughters, Adeze gave birth to a son, whom they named Namdi. From the moment Namdi was born, Adeze instilled hatred and wickedness towards Chibuzor in her son's mind. Whenever Obina showed more favor to Chibuzor, such as praising his hunting skills, Adeze would cry and lament about how her son was being treated unfairly. She constantly poisoned Namdi's mind against his older half-brother Chibuzor. One day, after a successful hunt, Chibuzor prepared a delicious feast to honor his father Obina. He made all of Obina's favorite dishes. However, Adeze saw this as an opportunity to further turn Obina against his son. When Chibuzor wasn't looking, she sprinkled a harmful portion into the food meant for Obina. Sure enough, as soon as Obina ate the well-prepared meal made by his once favorite son, he began to feel strange. In a rage, Obina chased Chibuzor out of the home with a cutlass, trying to kill him. Chibuzor could not understand what provoked such wrath from his loving father, but he had no choice but to flee for his life into the forest. From that day forward, Obina's affection was completely towards Namdi, pleasing Adeze greatly. She had successfully turned father against son through her deceitful trick. It was a typical morning like any other, until Adeze's piercing screams shattered the quiet air. She came running out of her hut, wailing and shouting accusations at the top of her lungs. "Chibuzor, murderer, he has killed his own father," she cried hysterically. Within moments, the village youths had apprehended Chibuzor and bound his hands tightly with rope. Despite his pleas of innocence, they dragged him forcefully towards the palace of the village king. When they arrived, Adeze fell at the king's feet sobbing. "My husband, my poor Obina," has been killed by none other than his firstborn son, Chibuzor. Chibuzor protested loudly, straining against his restraints. No, no, I did not murder my father. I loved him dearly. I awoke to terrible screams in the night, Adeze said dramatically. I found my husband lying in a pool of his own blood, beaten and bludgeoned to death, and there was Chibuzor standing over his body with a bloody club in his hand. He pleaded again. I am innocent, I swear it. Please, you must believe me. According to long-held tradition in the village, one of the greatest abominations was for a child to murder their father or mother. The punishment was to be buried alive beside the deceased parent's grave. Despite Chibuzor's desperate claims of being wrongfully accused, the king had no choice but to follow the ancient laws. With a heavy heart, he pronounced the sentence, Chibuzor was to be buried alive. Chibuzor's cries for mercy fell on deaf ears. The villagers bound him with heavy chains and dragged him towards the grave they had dug for Obinna. Adeze watched with dark satisfaction as Chibuzor was thrown into the deep pit on top of his father's lifeless body. Her eyes showed no remorse as the villagers began shoveling mounds of earth over Chibuzor, burying him alive as per the ancient traditions. With Chibuzor out of the way, Namdi and Adeze began enjoying the full wealth and status of Obinna's household. Adeze had finally gotten what she craved. Her son was now the heir apparent. But just a few weeks later, strange occurrences began plaguing the kingdom. Famine struck, livestock fell sick and died, crops withered from lack of rain. When the rains did come, they fell in biblical proportion, flooding fields and homes. The great king himself fell deathly ill with a haunting fever that would not break. It seemed the gods were angered and the kingdom was being cursed. The people lived in fear, desperate for answers. Their cries for reprieve went unanswered, until one day a young girl of just 8 years old came running to the village center. Obinna has visited me in my dreams, she exclaimed. He says the wicked Adeze had a hand in these troubles upon our kingdom. This revelation shook everyone to their core. The king immediately summoned Adeze to the palace. When she arrived, the little girl pointed a finger squarely at her and repeated the dream visitation from Obinna's spirit. Adeze fell to her knees, wailing in guilt and fear. She confessed to how she made Obinna hate his firstborn son out of jealousy. She admitted to murdering her husband by poisoning his food because a spiritualist warned her that the charm to turn Obinna against Chibuzor would eventually fail, and he would reunite with his son, leaving her powerless. The spiritualist told her killing Obinna was the only way to prevent this. The villagers recoiled in shock and horror at Adeze's evil confessions. The only way to lift this curse is to bring back the true heir, Chibuzor, and crown him as our next king, decreed one of the chiefs. But the villagers shook their heads solemnly. Chibuzor was buried alive. Surely he is dead by now. Just then, a tall figure appeared, striding into the village center. It was none other than Chibuzor, very much alive. A kind hunter had been passing by on the night of the burial and saw the terrible injustice occurring. Under cover of darkness, he dug Chibuzor out and helped him escape into hiding. The villagers erupted in cheers of relief and redemption. Adeze was banished forever from the kingdom she had brought so much misery upon. Chibuzor was swiftly crowned as the rightful king. He welcomed his 2 half-sisters back warmly, reinstating them as princesses of the kingdom. In time, Chibuzor took a new bride named Nena, who became his beloved queen. Under King Chibuzor's fair and just reign, the kingdom prospered once more. The curses lifted, and peace and abundance were restored to the land.